Hello everyone and thanks for joining. So this is what we've got to have a look at today. This is a set from PIKO Express and you can see it's quite a vintage item. Now I love sets like this. The vintage stuff is probably my most favourite thing to have a look at. This one has been waiting for me to have a look at for a while. So I'm really looking forward to having a look at it today. So you might think this is an electric shunter with some goods wagons, but you'd be wrong because it's a completely different model inside it. It says it's a Güterzug with the Locomotive BR55. So that's a steam locomotive from Germany, and this model is number 50522. So we're going to have a look at it today. So this, unsurprisingly, is a model I got secondhand. But what's really impressive in my mind is how good this box is. It does have a few scuffs on the corners and you can see some tape damage here. Overall, this is quite an amazing condition for such an old model. It's got some cool line drawings around the box, but what we really want to see is what's inside it. So let me get this open for you. So here we have the box open and you can see what's inside this set. You can see the locomotive, 4 wagons, all very similar, and we've got some track as well. One thing you'll notice is this hole here in the packaging. It looks as though something else needed to go in here. It could have been a controller because there's no controller here obviously, but I don't quite know what's missing from here. You'll see here as well that the plastic packaging has this cutout here, so this packaging actually might be used for something other than just this set. So I'm not too bothered overall. I think this is a great find. And the fact it's also got the track as well, couldn't ask for more. So let's have a look at each of these models in turn. So the obvious one to start with is the steam locomotive. So you can see that this is an 080 steam locomotive and it comes with a tender as well. So let's start at the front of this locomotive, and one thing catches your eye straight away, which is these incredible little jewels where the lights are. It doesn't have electric lighting on here, but these jewels are really quite something special. I've never seen these on a model train before. There's some nice detail on the end of the boiler here. It's quite a flat one on this locomotive, and you can see the number there, 553784. And down here on the buffer beam, you can see that it has a few little details and some rivet detail as well. It's quite nicely done, and it has these buffers with the white surround as well. We have this coupling out the front here. That's not going to be easy to take off if that's what you wanted to do. You'd have to do some major surgery to take this apart to get that out, but it's not too intrusive. It's certainly not as big as a Hornby one, for example, and you can see that they made use of the chassis part to add some additional red details down here. So looking along the boiler, there's a lot of detail in this moulding of different pieces that come down around this boiler, the ribs and some pipe work as well. None of this has been added on, it's all part of the moulding, apart from these steps which are quite delicate and plastic items that have been added in there. Up on the top there's also a lot of detail around the chimney and these parts here, including the dome, and you can see a screw here. I guess that's to take this locomotive apart. That kind of spoils it a little bit because obviously that's not prototypical, and then as you head towards the cab there's even more detail on the boiler molded in here as well. You can see that there's a red line that runs from the front of the locomotive all the way to the cab here, and then also underneath the cab. That has been painted on and it's been done very clearly as well. And talking of the cab, the first thing that hits you straight away is the big motor inside it there. So there's no detail on the end of the boiler, and you won't be able to fit a driver or anything inside here because it's all about the motor. But outside there is a wealth of detail on the side of the cab with the rivets, some printing of numbers, including the running number, and also here where it says Deutsche Reichsbahn. You can see the glazing, obviously it's very clear glazing here on the front of the cab as well, and these nice little hoods here which have been moulded into the main body. You can also see at the top of the cab, up and over the boiler here, there are some more windows which are also glazed as well, so that's quite nice. That's been added in. Down the other side of the locomotive it's slightly different because there are some additional parts being added on. These 2 tanks here in red plastic have been added in, as well as a black plastic part here and another part underneath there as well. So it does have some additional parts added in apart from the main moulding. And you can see that this tank detail down here, which is an additional part with all the plumbing as well, and the little pipes that go along here to this part here. So for an older vintage model, this is actually looking very detailed. You can even see here on the pistons that there's rivet detail as well as these hatches. So looking down at the valve gear and the wheels, so it's quite a coarse flange on the side of these wheels, very typical of the age of something like this. And you can see the valve gear here, it's all very loose. I'm hoping it's going to work okay, even though it does move quite a bit. And these chrome wheels have plastic inserts there and metal. Underneath you can see that all 4 wheels are driven, and the ones at the back here are fitted with traction tyres. Okay, let's have a look at the tender. This is quite a small tender and it is quite light. There is a bit of weight to it though, there must be a weight inside it. And looking a bit closer, we have numbers printed on the side here which are very small but nicely added in, and you can see down the side of the tender that there's nice rivet detail. There's even a nice texture on this as well. Looking around the back, we've got another two of these little jewels representing lights, so I'm really quite taken with those. I think that's really fantastic. And we have a number here as well printed on the back of the tender. There's also a lot of moulded detail of brackets and clips and things here as well, and that extends down onto the buffer beam where you can see a lot of rivet detail there. And again, we have these buffers with the white surrounds. At the business end of this tender, there's not a lot of detail. There is a step here, there is some indication of coal coming through for the firemen, and a few other hatches which are moulded into the main piece of plastic. And looking up top, we've got this coal fitted in here, and I think that's actually quite a poor representation of coal. It almost looks like some lumpy soup actually. And further back down here, we've got another panel with brackets and a little clip as if it could open. Looking at the red part down below, there's some really nice detail on this though. Lots of rivets, lots of nice relief, and lots of faithfully reproduced parts make it really quite interesting. And finally, looking underneath, we've got the 3 axles of this model. They are just all free running, and the coupling at the back doesn't look as though this one can be replaced either. And finally, the coupling to the locomotive is quite a simple drawbar, and it connects into this little peg on the back of the locomotive quite easily. So there we go. Okay, let's have a look at some of the wagons. So they're all very similar box cars and very typical of German railway wagons. This one has got a DR logo on it and some printing down here. It's a nice enough moulding. There's a lot of detail of planks and various ribs on this, and also the handle here for the door. It doesn't open on this one though. You've also got these hand grips on the corners of the model. Now these almost always get broken off, these models, and you can see another little bracket here. But incredibly, this one has survived even though it's quite an old model. You can see these white flashes that have been printed on the corners here, and at the ends you can see some rivet detail of the frame and also the planking detail as well. There's a little bit of rivet detail on the buffer beam, but not that much detail, and quite basic buffers which are part of the bottom moulding. Up on the roof, nothing to talk about, but crucially there's no moulding mark right in the middle. It's very smooth and that's quite nice. And looking at the chassis, it's fairly detailed here. We've got some nice spring detail, brake blocks in line with the wheels, a nice set of steps as well. There's a little bit of detail of brake gear moulded in here, and we have the same couplings which can't be changed, but they are cantilevered and sprung as well. The wheels are very free rolling, they're just metal with plastic inserts. So here we have another van. It's identical to the first one, even down to the running number. So the next van is obviously a different colour, but it's a different design as well. We've got these air vent panels up here moulded in, and we've got a different arrangement of printed letters and logos on the side of this wagon. The roof is slightly different on this one because it's more textured, but again, no moulding mark as well, which is great. And we don't have so much detail on the end of these wagons, and a very similar chassis to the ones we've seen just a moment ago. And finally, the fourth wagon is another one of the darker wagons. It's exactly the same again. So it looks like we've got 2 types of wagon and 2 examples of each. But also in this set, we've got a selection of track. This track is quite unusual. I'm used to Hornby and PIKO track, but this one is actually hollow and it slots together with this little peg which goes into the hole on the other one. So it's quite interesting to see this older type of track. And we've got some straights and one which has this connector for easy connection up to your controller. So I'm quite curious to see what the mechanism is like in this steam locomotive. So I'm going to take off the screw on the dome here and see if we can take it apart, and we'll have a look at the mechanism. So it came apart really simply, and now we can have a look at the mechanism in this locomotive. So we've got the motor up here at the back, a couple of coils and a resistor it looks like, and that drives a rather excessive amount of gear wheels here right the way down and drives each of these wheels in turn. So there's a lot of moving parts on this locomotive. I think what I'm going to do while we've got this apart is just apply a little bit of oil into these gears here. It does move fine when I move it with my finger, but it is a little bit noisy even just doing that. So it could benefit from a little bit of oil, so I'm just going to do that now. So here's the star of my oiling sessions. It's this little bottle. I've talked about it before in my videos. It's from a Tamiya remote control car kit, and it's worked great for me, and here it is again working on this model. So we don't need a lot of oil on these gears, so I'm just going to apply it really sparingly and then work it in. Okay, I think that should do, and I'm itching to give this a go, so let's get this on the test track and give it a run. Okay, we've got it on the test track, let's give it some power and see what happens. Wow, that's great news, it just worked straight away, so I'm quite surprised about that. I'm going to put the body back on and we'll give it a proper run. We've got it back together, I've added in the tender and a wagon, so let's give it a try. So it ran really good there, I'm quite impressed, but it is a noisy old thing. But then, aren't we all sometimes? I'm quite surprised it did run so good though, but the fact that all those gears still run and it works no problem at all, okay, a little bit noisy, but without any problem, is really quite incredible. Anyway, I'm going to put this on the scales, let's see how much it weighs. 280 grams. One of the vans weighs 61 grams, and I would assume the others are about the same. So this vintage model from PIKO with its BR55 locomotive has turned out to be a real cool set. When I bought this, I did actually think it would be something special, and it hasn't disappointed me. It's just such a wonderful model railway set, and I'm really glad it's come my way. Some of the things I like about this set are undoubtedly the locomotive itself. It's got such a lot of appeal. It looks so cool. It's got this kind of vintage look to it, and yet it still runs really well. I absolutely love the fact that it's got the little jewels in the lights at the front and the back. It really makes the lights twinkle, and even though there's no power going to them, it almost looks as though they're actually switched on. I don't know why more manufacturers don't actually do that for their models, because it really looks quite cool in my book. I also like the running gear on this model. It looks like it shouldn't work, or it should cause a lot of problems because it's so loose, but yet it does actually work, and it works really well. The motor as well is faring very good. It's a vintage model, but it runs fine. It is a bit noisy, but that's to do with all the gears inside this model. It might benefit from something like a bit of grease on those gears, and then it maybe runs a bit quieter. But that's a small price to pay for such a great little model. I'm not so keen on the motor being inside the cab and there being no other detail in there, but I guess it's a compromise again because of the size of this model and the motors that were available at the time when this was made. Now the downsides to this model, and I am being sympathetic because it's quite an old model, but I don't think that the coal in the tender looks that good, and it would definitely benefit from being replaced with something more convincing. And I also don't like the fact that it's got the screw in the dome there, but one of the things that you could do is just modify this model a little bit and cover over that screw top. I think the wagons that come with the set are quite a decent moulding on each of them. They look okay. On the downside, I think because you get two identical of each model of wagon, that it just doesn't look quite good. I think they probably could have mixed it up and had 4 different wagons, and that would have made it even better. But really, these are small niggly things compared to what is on offer here. It is a vintage model. I think I've been very lucky with this one because the box is in great condition, the model runs fine, there's no damage on any of this at all, and it all has that vintage appeal, which I really love. So if you're into vintage model railways as well, and you see this model set or similar sets from PIKO of this era, I think they're well worth getting. I think they would make a great addition to your collection, and I don't think you'll be disappointed if you're a collector of vintage model railways with this set. So I hope you liked this video and my analysis of this PIKO set. If you did, please let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you thought of my analysis. And if you have this PIKO set or another one like it from this era, let me know in the comments below, because I'd love to know what you've got and your thoughts on it. So I'm just going to wrap up by showing you some more photos of the locomotive. But that's it for today. See you next time.